I also think that maybe I don't know.
What?
If you go in the direction of you're calling it the love, then life like works out for you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. Like,
I might go to the beach.
Eventually, all at once, we each exist when we eat. Eventually, all at once, each realize we're existing.
I've done a few of these where I thought I was recording, I wasn't. It's just
oh, I did one of those. Sucked.
works. Yeah, because you have to like arm the track, hit record again, and it's going.
Yeah, I did that with this artist, Jason Lazarus. He's so good. A friend of mine for like 20 years. And then I thought I was doing like the epic, like the Jason Lazarus interview for all time. And then at the end, after like 2 hours, I was like, oh, okay, cool.
Did you tell him?
Yeah, because I ended up just like writing a thing from memory. Yeah.
Well, I don't do intros or anything. I don't know. It feels weird. Tim Kinsella, thank you. We're in your place.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me over. And I just finished your book of tour journals and how horrific your experience is with interviews. I kept focusing on those.
I don't remember that. I mean, that's just like sometimes people are horrific, and sometimes interacting with horrific people is horrific. You know, I mean, I guess interacting with horrific people can be okay somehow, maybe sometimes, but right, I don't remember that as like, if I think about the tour diaries, I don't think, oh, what a horrific time for me. Although some people have read them and been like, wow, that was rough, huh?
Yeah, I was thinking, well, maybe it's just that day. Only the bad ones sticking your head enough to write about, the ones that are okay.
Sure. I mean, also, like, the thing about touring in the way we did was, like, it was pretty exhausting, you know? I'm sure that comes across in there.
Yeah.
I do remember there's, like, that MTV2 interview in there.
Yeah, that's how it opens up. That's one of the first pages.
Yeah, that was really... Because whatever, you, like, if you've read even just that book, you have a sense of, like, what I do. The interviews that were horrible were like those MTV2 ones where they just like start with the assumption, okay, you are an alternative rock band, huh? And it's just like, this is, yeah.
In preparing to talk to you, I listened to the stuff that you had done or stuff that people wrote, and it seems like people rehash things that are just like, I don't know, do a simple Google search and you can find the... anyway, I don't know. It's so much harder than people might think. I don't know how to interview people.
Oh, yeah, sure.
What to ask.
Sure.
I was thinking we could start in the year 2001.
Okay.
Early that year. Before Owls, after The Gap.
I don't know. I mean, The Gap, there was one EP that came out, one last Joan of Arc EP at that time, made out of the sessions from The Gap, of like, because there was so much recorded for that. But that had become, the making of The Gap was like the first record we made on all Pro Tools. I think it was the second Joan of Arc record, How Memory Works, was we sequenced it on Pro Tools. And I remember my friend Casey, who engineered all those early records, being like, can you imagine someday we're going to make a record just on this? And it was like, no, that's crazy, you know? And then the next record, Live in Chicago, he and I both got Pro Tools setups in our house, like each got one in our own apartments, and that was the first time that we ever, like, for the same amount of money that, you know, would get you, like, a week or two in a studio, we could spend months recording at home, you know?
Yeah.
So that was the total, like, first big shift, how technology affected how we wrote and recorded. And then The Gap was really like this dare to ourselves of like, well, anything is possible, you know? So we just like totally overloaded, like we can process every measure of every song on every instrument. We don't need any, you know, like this sort of like, you mentioned Miles Davis earlier. It was like our idea of like this, like kind of like, I think we wanted to do like this sort of talk record where it was just like layers and layers and layers of shifting things, but then also like this Miles Davis thing of like, you don't need to recognize what that instrument is, you know?
Yeah.
So Owls was very much a response to that, because that first Owls record was written in 5 days, and then like...
Well, before that even, after the gap, did you kind of decide, I'm going to change gears or something?
Yeah, but it wasn't... I mean, people hated that record. Like, it was just so, like, the response from the whole world was just like, what have you guys done? It wasn't like people even just ignored it. It was like it got like a lot of vitriolic attention. But the shift to just like playing as a live band in Owls and writing as a live band wasn't in response to like the popular response to that record, just as much as like what we needed to get back in touch with, like, because the Gap was like 5 people sitting in their apartments for a year, all day, every day, totally stoned, just like never actually touching instruments, but just like all sitting on our laptops together, you know? So,
it was a really weird time for rock music in general. Even like people that were trying to make something kind of mainstream, Pro Tools and digital stuff was taking over.
yeah.
I think it's a terrible time for music in general.
We were really obsessed with like the lack of tape hiss, which I think isn't a thing that even registers anymore. It's like so old fashioned, but at the time that was the thing that was blowing our minds. Like that was sort of the depth or intensity of our listening at that time, was we were all just like, this is crazy, no tape hiss. And so we think the whole record is about, wow, imagine a record without tape hiss. But like now just that's just how records are. So we are making this like grandiose, you know, getting lost in this like wormhole statement for a thing that wasn't even like it ended up not being a big issue
Yeah.
in the world. Silence.
How do you decide then to try to form a more traditional rock band after that?
Owls, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, Owls was just the original Cat and Jazz lineup, and I guess by that point we'd only been broken up 5 years. It was like a real intense 5 years for each of us in like our personal lives. A lot of chaos.
Kids to adults.
Yeah, and right. Kids to adults, but like all of the sort of like, you know, drugs and crime and bad decisions of like shit that you could do as a kid that you like, once you're becoming an adult, you're like, oh wait, this is like how I'm actually going to be this person? No, you know?
Yeah.
So that was sort of the first time that we had all... It wasn't that we so much knew, oh, we need this shift to live band, as much as that happened at the same time that we were all the Cat and Jazz members were like back in touch with each other and all, you know, now it's clear we were still all a mess at that point, but at the time we were like, oh, we got our shit together enough to try this. So, yeah. So we had been wanting to play together.
And you wrote the record in 5 days. It blows my mind. I love the record.
Oh, thanks.
I can't even fathom it.
It was, yeah, well, it was, I mean, you know, Victor had the riffs already. It wasn't like he didn't sit down and write the riffs in those 5 days, but the songs were all put together in 5 days.
They were all based around riffs he had.
Yeah. Maybe there was a song or two that started with bass lines, but, yeah, we had this weird practice space at the time. I mean, we didn't have a practice space because we weren't a band, but one of us had this friend whose like dad owned this factory, and somehow we ended up, I don't remember the details at all how we ended up there, but we were in the locker room of this factory writing that record. It was just like we knew, okay, we have this week. Everyone just like lock ourselves in for these 5 days. But we were in like this factory locker room, so all these guys are like working on these like die cut machines on this big floor, and then we're sort of like overlooking it, and they would sort of come in to change and get stuff out of their lockers, and they're just like, what is going on here?
Then 9/11 happens before you tour.
We might have done, I can't remember if we had, no, that was the first tour. Maybe we had like just done the West Coast. I feel like maybe we did the West Coast and we're home for a break. And then we were supposed to play New York, I guess, September 14th. Irving Plaza, I remember. Maybe it was Tramps. It was one of those places that was right by there. And I think we had already done the West Coast. And then we were like home for a 2-week break. And 9/11, my roommate, I was supposed to go pick up the van with my brother to leave for Cleveland the next day. And my roommate at the time kept knocking on my door and woke me up and was like, I'm sorry, your brother keeps calling you. You know, this is before cell phones. Your brother's insisting I wake you up. Something about a plane crash. And I was like, plane crash? What? We gotta go get that van, you know. So yeah, so it was really weird. We still left the next day. So we were on tour.
You played a show in Cleveland on the 12th?
On the 12th. It was such a funny show because there were still some people there, a lot less than had been at like Joan of Arc shows in Cleveland up till then. And it was really funny to like, hadn't started showing commercials on TV again yet. I don't know if you remember that. Yeah,
they didn't have anything on TV. It was
just nonstop broadcast.
Yeah,
news, yeah,
I just remember 2 people in New York City behind wreckage for 3 weeks or something.
Yeah, so they kept the TVs on at the club. So it was a really weird show because the TVs are behind the bar, and we would just like be playing a song and look out, and everyone in the room would have their heads turned towards the TVs, just like standing at the stage as if they're watching the show, but watching the TVs behind the bar. It was really weird.
And that was the beginning of that tour?
Yeah.
I read that you toured that month, so I guess you just kept going out.
Yeah, so I remember that instead of playing like 2 nights in a row in New York, we were like sick of like going to the South and playing to no one, so we routed the tour to go back through New York instead of like going south, just like doing like a double ring up there. I remember, so it was like October 2nd, and we had been driving through New York, like to get from one show, because we were supposed to be there on the 13th.
And that got canceled.
That was obviously canceled. But we still had like some New Jersey shows, like Connecticut or whatever. Somehow, I remember driving through the city a couple times in between shows and seeing all the smoke, and then so it's like obviously on everyone's minds all the time. And then October 2nd was our second New York show, and we're obviously pulling into town talking about all this. And then like opening the doors to the van, I don't remember where the show was, but the guys who worked there, like waiting at the curb to help us load in, I remember like opening the doors and stepping out and being like, oh my God, what's that smell? Like such an idiot. And they were like, World Trade Center? And I was like, oh yeah, right. But this is like 3 weeks later, and it was still, yeah.
Well, I bring it up because it sounds stupid to say it. It's one of those events, it's hard to overstate the impact. Like you say it was a big deal and everybody's like, of course it's a big deal. But then you sit back and think like, I mean, there's still fucking troops in Iraq right now. It's a hard to...
Yeah, you said it's hard to overstate its impact, but it's hard to actually even come close to stating its impact. Like it's impossible to express how much everything changed in America at that point. Even like the ticker at the bottom of the screen wasn't like a thing. You know what I mean? Like the news
Yeah.
that started that day, you know.
I wanted to talk to you about it because as I was listening to some of those Joan of Arc records, it made me realize how much I was impacted, you know.
You were in Virginia at the time?
Yeah, and just out of D.C. So, I mean...
That was creepy.
My grandfather was in the Pentagon. My grandfather and my mother were in the Pentagon.
Oh.
My grandfather definitely, yeah.
What
and
do
he
they
was
say
like,
about it? He doesn't... Does he tell you it was a plane that hit it?
I'm not close to him enough. He's an old school Vietnam, Korean War vet. I haven't spoken more than 2 sentences with him ever. I just... When you ask the impact, though, I mean, where I grow up, everybody's parents work for the government.
Yeah.
So not only are they impacted by the event, they're also impacted by the following
the response.
crackdown.
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important thing that sort of like describes the event. I mean, I think the events happen for the reaction to the events. You know what I mean? Like this supposed coup in Turkey last month. Like, I can't believe... I was so happy to have a Turkish Uber driver the other day and just be like, everyone knows that coup is total bullshit, right? He's like, yeah, of course he did it himself. But it's like in America, you're like, people think you're like paranoid or conspiracy theorist or something, when actually it's just so obvious, like, who benefits from this? Oh, okay, who did it? You know, it's like, and if that was America right now, the laws they've imposed there, like, I would be in prison as like a musician and a college teacher and running a small press. Those are like, that'd be 3 ways that I would have been included in the roundup, you know?
Yeah. I was, 14 or something, and I feel like, I mean, maybe where I grew up was always a little conservative outside of D.C., but I feel like it was just, now looking back, I have the perspective like, those are just the people that were just the most gung-ho, know, let's start cracking down. I mean, I don't know if it was everywhere. In my area, there's these license plates that are, it's like a pentagon with like the World Trade Center inside with a logo. Do you know what I'm talking about? Well, everybody had those license plates.
Sure, you were unpatriotic if you didn't have a flag.
Yeah, I don't know.
I remember some magazine at the time, like, gave me like a disposable camera and was like, take pictures of the Owls tour. And we're just, you know, I can't remember what it was, but it was like, I had this disposable camera. They're like, just take pictures, whatever you want, send it to us. And that's like the Owls tour diary. And I remember just taking like 24 pictures of American flags because they were just like suddenly everywhere. And, you know, like that was weird. I mean, that's a culturally wide psychological shift, you know, like that now we just take for granted. Like, if everyone wears an American flag pin on their lapel.
Yeah. Or, of course, we're just going to be in the Middle East forever. That's just what it is, you know.
Yeah. I mean, it was already that. It was just this sort of course, now we all know it, you know.
Did the Owls record feel political at all to you? Like, what was that like in such a politically charged time promoting that record? Yeah,
it was. I mean, I remember that. But this is, you know, the second Owls record. This is funny. There's this Joan of Arc song on Boo Human called 9/11-2.
Yeah.
That, like, I always knew I was being funny. You know, I understand hyperbole. So when the second Owls record came out, in between that coming out and doing the tour, I got dumped, and I was like super heartbroken over this person. I was just like miserable, you know, like in a way I hadn't been in like forever. Like that I didn't know I had the capacity to be like that anymore. And I remember being on that tour and just every night being like, oh, it's like every one of these, like playing these songs, being like, oh, it's like every one of these was like written about this, even though they were all written before it. And then I remembered that the first Owls record felt like that with 9/11, that it was just, I remember that night in Cleveland with everyone's heads turned, just being like, oh man, every single song seems like we're anticipating this, you know?
You still think that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I feel like, not to sound all shamany or something, but like, especially in that period, the way I was writing songs was mostly like I had like this 12 years where I was stoned every minute of every day from like 18 to 30. And the way I wrote songs in that period was literally, the lyrics. I would have a dictionary and I would be super stoned and I would like flip to a page, drop my finger on a word, then like flip to another page, drop my finger on the word, and then just like be like, okay, what do these two words together lead to this word? You know what I mean?
Sure.
It was just a lot of like...
It was like a prompt. Or like a
it was like a prompt, but it also felt like... It wasn't a prompt like, oh, now I'm going to pontificate on this subject. It was like, okay, this is my word, and this is the word. Like, it felt like a sort of chance operation that I then sort of had to like sculpt. So that means of sculpting is just like it was very much like surrendering to the process to guide me. You know, I've never been much of like a songwriter who's like, I want to express this, you know. I've always just felt like I'm just have to express what comes to me. And so like, I don't exist in a earth ship out in the desert. Like, yeah. I am stewed in the broth of all the cultural bullshit. So like, if I'm doing my job and sort of staying out of the way and just expressing, holding a mirror up to the world in a way, then of course that shit's going to get in there, you know? Like, yeah. Of course it's political.
If I was writing a book about your work or something, I would write like pre and post 9/11. Like in my head, I mean, I don't know. Everybody interprets it differently, but in my head, something like exploded after. That's kind of why I wanted to start there, because it's like
something exploded creatively, like or like in terms of just ambition, or
things got so much more pointed and angry. I mean, that's my interpretation after that.
I mean, I know that the T-shirts on the Gap tour were just white T-shirts with text on them, and just white T-shirts, black text, and they one said "Down with the spectacular commodity culture," and the other said "The global economy is a doomsday machine." So these were like the T-shirts sold on the Gap tours, and I was well aware. I was like very much self-aware of feeling like, okay, it's the fall of the Roman Empire. This is, before Bush, like during the Clinton years, I just felt like, okay, fall of the Roman Empire. I'm not sure what kind of world. I guess I'm going to be like this drunken traveling bard because I don't know what else to do at the fall of an empire, you know?
Yeah.
So it may have become more pointed, but it was always there. Give me another beer.
I wanted to talk about consistency or productivity. You are a model of someone who has a super consistent output.
I don't know if it's consistent, but it's, what's the other word you used?
Productive?
Well, I mean, I guess there's a lot. It's consistent in that it keeps coming out. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about, if you made some kind of table of records and years, do you think you've got to average a record a year?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's weird because it doesn't feel like work to do that. I don't know. I'm just like doing what I love doing. Like I wake up every morning and I am so excited to get to work.
Do you give yourself goals?
Yeah, for sure. But the goals have never been like, I'm going to put out this many records or something. But you mean like daily goals? Maybe
daily, or this year I'm going to finish a record. This year I'm going to write a book.
No, it doesn't feel as... It doesn't... I mean, for sure. But it also, like... it's all, like, very intentional, Like, I feel like... This feels like the sort of, like, blessing of punk rock at the time. You know, everyone talks about punk rock as this sort of like fervor of religious conversion, you know, but like the DIY channel is like a cable channel now for like arts and crafts, right?
Yeah.
But like, you know, 100 years ago when I was a teenager and like discovered this, it was like a miracle to just be like, oh my God, my whole life I thought like bands like have to like somehow try to make it or something, you know what I mean? And they're like, there's these things you gotta do to like make it. And then this total huge psychological shift as like a, you know, adolescent really. I was like, no, you just make the thing. Like, you make it, you know?
Or
like,
you don't have to wait for somebody to bless you to say, you are now allowed to be a person that gets to put out stuff.
Yeah.
That's hard now to tell somebody who's 15 because, of course, you can put out something.
Right. You can just, like, get what, you know, make a thing on your phone, post it to SoundCloud on your phone. Like, it's like a whole... Totally
there is still
thing.
a blessing, though. It's just,
for sure.
It's secret and hidden. You know, there's this myth that, like, anybody can put out something by themselves. And, but that's not, I don't buy into that at all. I think being a DIY artist is just as hard now as it was in the 90s, maybe harder.
Well, because there's that much more of it. I mean, it's like the old, like, punk rock psychic revolution of like, oh, anyone could be in a band, but that also doesn't mean everyone should. Like, a lot of people just didn't have very interesting ideas, you know?
Yeah.
But, you know, this is going to sound funny because I have like a certain amount of success or something, but like those people, these sort of like gatekeepers, especially in Chicago, have like totally never like tapped me for like, okay, you're allowed to come through. You know what I mean? Like, I haven't been...
Totally. You said you write goals. Does your work...
But, well, I mean, I want, but it's not like I don't have, it's not like goal setting, and it's not like...
that's not the key to how you've done it. And that's kind of what I'm getting at. How did you get there?
Get where? Here?
Being a creative, productive person day in and day out is the hardest thing in the world. How did you get to doing that?
No, I mean, not if... there's just... I mean, like, when I was a kid, there was such, like, an intense sense of mission to it, you know? Where it was, like... I was, like, a junior in high school when the first Captain Jazz 7-inch came out. And, I feel like there was this period where, like, we were, like, the younger band, and everyone was like, oh, isn't it cute how young this band is? And now we're, like, the old band around town, but I don't remember this whole intermediate period where we were just, like, the normal band. Like, we were just, like, either this sort of, like, like, cute novelty, or, like, these old grizzled veterans or something. But it's like, wait, where did just being a band happen? But to get back to your question of... how, right, the big secret for, like, how do I get away, like, doing this as a 41-year-old, you know, because, like, when you're 25, all your friends are geniuses, and all your friends are in the best band in the world, you know?
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, everyone starts, like, eating more, watching a little more TV, they, like this person okay... but they're afraid no one will ever love them. They don't want to die alone. So they're like, oh, I better just be with this person. And then they're like, oh, life is meaningless. I better have a kid so that something depends on me.
Their day job sucks them in.
Yeah.
This is I'm in it right now. Yeah.
So I just don't have like a wife or kids or even a girlfriend or like, not to sound like it's so selfish or something, but it's like the thing that is meaningful to me is this work, you know?
Sure.
And there's no one else's life I'm fucking up by doing it. And there's nothing else in my life if I don't do it. So it's like...
Do you think you don't have that stuff because you care about your work more than those people?
More than I care about my potential...
No, or more than
child?
the people that their day job, they got a promotion, and now they only rehearse once a week, and then less, and then they can't go on tour, and then they got to quit the band. How did that not? Or why aren't you there?
I don't know. I was always in that sweet spot of like never successful enough to get lazy, but always like successful enough to be encouraged to keep doing it. You know what I mean? Like there was never like, oh, what's the point? There's no audience. But there was never like, oh, here's a lot of money. You can like chill out for a while. There's the practical motivation of like, oh, I need to go play shows. Oh, I need to make a record. But, you know, like, so regarding, like, goals or to-do lists, I mean, every night before I go to sleep, if you were to ask me right now, what is it, August? If you were to ask me what am I doing next May 9th, I can tell you pretty clearly, like, you know, not what times of the day each thing is happening, but, like, okay, this is the thing I'm supposed to be working on, and, like, so there's a sort of, like, momentum. Each night before I fall asleep, I like have a very detailed list of what I need to get done the next day, you know? Like I read an interview with that actor, Michael Shannon, and I got so jealous of him. He was talking about how his life is broken down to the 15 minutes each day. Like he wakes up each morning and knows where he needs to be each 15 minutes. And I was so jealous because I was like, I just got every half hour. Like, I'm such a loser. That's real organization.
Have you always been that way?
No, man, not at all. Just, you know, there's like I said, that momentum, and there's like a certain magnetism.
Sure.
Magnetic quality of like, sometimes I get asked to do cool things, and like, one of my friends will be like, man, that sucks. How come you get asked to do this cool thing and I didn't? And it's like, well, did you do the? Because I did the last. Because I also got invited to the last cool thing.
Yeah.
And there's a way in which like certain petty, bitchy friends of mine are like, oh, the world is unjust because you get these invitations. But it's also like, man, you could also like do something, and then people will be like, oh, you did a thing? Cool. Would you like to do a thing like this? You know? I mean, it's all. Yeah. Self-sustaining magnets.
I believe you, but I also have a feeling, I mean, I just met you, so I don't know, but sure. I have a feeling that there's also this secret ingredient of bravery and belief that somebody like you has, that somebody who took the promotion that took away their band doesn't have. Like, you're not giving yourself credit for that. I'm totally interested in what...
It is weird. Like, I think about certain people that, like, you'll meet who, like, are independently wealthy or something, but they don't do anything. And, there is a thing where it's like, oh, you ever meet, like, a depressed, independently wealthy person? Like, I just want to, like, throw him off a building or just, like, kick him in the balls. It's just like, what the fuck is your problem? You don't have to do that thing everyone else, like the struggle for basic sustenance and shelter that has defined the consciousness of every human who's ever been born, you don't have to deal with. And still you, like, can't make a thing happen? Like, you literally have all the time in the world?
Yeah, but I can understand. I'm not independently wealthy at all, but I have just a 9-to-5. I can afford to come here or buy cotton candy grapes.
Yeah, that feels really nice.
I still can be depressed, so I can understand. I don't know. Depression's a whole nother.
Yeah. No, of course, and this is and that's like no, I get it. Like, I've struggled at times in my life with it, and I understand. But I'm bringing up that because that seems like the sort of bravery. Because it's like, what are you actually risking? All I'm risking is, like, I'm not risking starving my, like, in a way, quite literally, I've bet my life on the success, whatever that means, of my creative output. But, like, what, also not that big a bet. Like, if I fuck this up, there'll be another life sometime soon. You know?
That's the bravery, though. That's what most people don't have, I think.
They get
so much in their head about...
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I've been there totally.
You're afraid of being homeless?
Well, yeah, that's why I'm working my 9 to 5. But I think there's also that deeper thing, like you don't want to be a buffoon, or you don't want to fail, or that type of bravery for sure.
I was picked on a lot as a kid. You know, my therapist, I'm not going to tell you these things, but my therapist broke it down for me very neatly a year or two ago. He's like, really, you have the best life in the world. You just got these 5 things that are fucked up. And I was like, oh, man, it is like so great to just be like, there's really just those 5 things. Like, talk about organizing. Just if you can organize, oh, these are my formative disappointments. And, you know, like, you shift. You don't, like, adapt to, like, profound heartbreak or disappointment. You, like, become a different person in response to that, you know? And so, like, not to sound like Henry Rollins over here or something, but, like, I truly believe that people, like, create their own lives, and, like, not to, like, diminish the privileges, you know, like, maybe I'm not afraid of being homeless because I know that, like, my mom and my brother would take me in, or I know that, like, I have a million friends, someone would let me sleep on their couch. So maybe that bravery comes from community, but also, like, that bravery sort of comes from, like, I feel like I've gotten through some shit, some, like, you know, intense humiliations, and just been like, well, I'm stronger for it. So, yeah.
It's still, I'm thinking about what you said. I think I know, maybe I'm even speaking for myself, a lot of people that they are not going to be homeless either, but they would tell you that what's holding them back in life is that fear
of being homeless
or being broke or whatever. You know, I just mean to say a lot of people are in the same position as you, but they're not organizing their thoughts enough to maybe think that.
That is totally, like, the defining struggle from, like, every ancient book of wisdom to every, like, sacred text to, like, every current bestseller. Like, that is the shift from, like, being, like, a child or a monkey to, like, being an adult, is, like, you have to master your own mind. Like, it's that simple. Like, just, like, control your own shit.
It's also one of those...
If you're not, you're like a fucking animal, man.
It's one of those things, though, where it's like, it's one thing to say rationally, X, Y, and Z probably won't happen to me. But it's a whole nother thing to actually make the actions in your life to not be affected by those fears.
Yeah, but what choice do you have? I mean, it's like, I mean, it's sort of like a cliche of, like, popular culture, self-help, new agey stuff about, like, the choice of, like, love and fear. But the more you, like, think about it, and I'm talking about, like, I'm on, like, year 25 of, like, reading this shit every day and pondering it constantly, and it's like, I mean, I think about this too as, like, a 41-year-old guy whose life is basically the same as when I was 21. It's different in a lot of ways, but, like, the sort of punk rock ethics are more real now than they ever were, you know, and, like, deeper and heavier to me than they ever were. Even if on the surface certain things might look like compromises, like, oh, Old Style's going to sponsor your show or something. The, like, choice between, like, fear and love, like, being, like, a constant conscious thing is, like, huge, and it gets, like, more real to me, even though it seems like a simplistic kind of thing when you're young. That's, like, yeah, that's it. Like, everything comes down to that, like, binary thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm maybe a little ranting.
No, I can go on forever about it. I just, I don't know. Just very practically for me, like, 4 years ago, I had testicular cancer. Luckily, I had a day job, insurance.
Yeah.
You cut off your ball, you're fine. It's almost, I mean, it's scary, whatever. But
it's terrifying,
like, if I didn't have a day job,
right.
I would have, the $3,000 surgery would have been $200,000.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
CAT scans that are $200 would have been
Yeah.
$15,000. And I hear you. And
Yeah.
I totally...
Yeah, and I don't mean to like diminish my privileges. By,
No,
like,
because I'm just as...
I mean, I do have insurance that I pay for.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't not have day jobs. I don't. I mean, it's.
Oh,
like,
no, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm just putting it on this thing of... Because I fight with this with myself. Like, I fucking hate my day job. It's taking me away from doing what I want to be doing. And yet, it's like...
Yeah, no, that's super real. Yeah.
And... But if I don't know. I also think that maybe I don't know.
What?
If you go in the direction of you're calling it the love, then life like works out for you. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, right. Like,
that's the thing about life is you can't live both options simultaneously and make sure that the one works out for you.
Well, let me tell you, like, it's gonna sound kind of heavy. I hope I hope this isn't a little like too wishy-washy, new agey heavy. But like, one important rule I think is don't be a pussy. I think people just don't say that to each other enough, you know. And I'm not saying that as like, you know, I'm not using that phrase to diminish the history of feminism or something. I'm not like trying to be hyper macho or even subconsciously being hyper macho. I'm just saying it's important to not be a pussy.
Yeah.
I understand maybe I'm using the word in a way that people are like, okay, it's inherently sexist to say that, but like just trying to make a point.
Yeah.
You know,
There's
I'm not calling you a pussy for getting testicular cancer either. Like, obviously,
but
that's like
using
a huge
it as
real thing.
No. But it is. Everybody has their thing that's my thing, and other people have their thing, and I think they use it as this kind of shield. Like, I can't do X, Y, and Z because of
Right. So
and
that's
other people have those issues and don't use it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, right, because that's what I was saying about like that comes down to you to like. I feel like I'm Tony Robbins over here.
What's the history favors the bold or something? That's a quote, right?
Sounds like it would be.
Do you think your work is misunderstood?
No. I think occasionally I'll like read something about it that's like not how okay, this is what I'm trying to say. I don't feel that I'm misunderstood. Like, but sometimes I will read something about something I've made that assumes so much about me and has very little in common with what I think my motives were, that makes me feel like misunderstood in that way. But to say it's misunderstood would to assume that I have some greater understanding of what it is than anyone else. You know what I mean?
You don't think you do?
No way. No. It's all very intentional, but I can't like say what it means, you know?
Do you care then in that scenario where you're like, this interpretation isn't what I thought I was putting in the world? Does it bum you out when it's not taken that way?
I mean, not anymore. Like, honestly, I don't like, you know, I'm like in a really privileged, sweet spot these days, you know? Like, there's not like a large audience for what I do by any means, but it's like, I guess I'm just saying that I don't worry about it, but for a long time I might have said I didn't worry about it, but I still did. But at this point, it's like so far behind me even thinking about that. Like, yeah, I know that sounds stupid, but it's also like, it's totally, that's not part of my job.
Do you think you're more... Are you more personal now than do you think you were before?
No.
No?
Maybe. No.
I wonder about it specifically because I feel like that is it's the theme of a lot of work that I see across mediums, a lot of focus on self and
Me? Of my work or
no,
in general?
Just in the world.
Yeah. That's good. I would have felt so bummed if you were like,
No.
that's a thing I see in you.
So I guess I'm trying to put that on you. I see like I read a lot of like, personal memoir type stuff and music. I don't know if music. It just seems like that is the focus for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. That works well in like as a sort of like very narrow-minded and like a simplistic way to like keep people. I don't want to sound too harsh. I saw this old friends of mine in this band, and I love all the people very much. And when I like first heard their band, I met them as a band. It wasn't like old friends of mine and then started a band. When I first heard the band, I was like, "Oh my God, this is awful music. How funny that we would be on tour together. We have like nothing in common." But then, like within a couple days, I'm like, man, they're so cool. This is great. And now years later, I feel like I'm a fan of the band, right? But I hadn't seen them in years. And then I went to see it after not seeing it or hearing it for some years. And it wasn't just like a bummer. It like really like filled me with rage. Because all I kept thinking was every song feels like the narrative is heterosexual couple ends up together in the end happy. Heterosexual couple doesn't work things out sad. And it was like, does this creative work only exist to reaffirm like the most basic social norms?
Yeah, so much of art can be boiled down to that. Like, is life so simple that that's it?
Yeah, it is such a bummer. And there's, and it's like, these aren't like some hacks. It's like people who are like supposedly like very sophisticated commentators on this sort of,
Yeah.
I don't know. That stuff doesn't interest me.
I see the world now is so much more interested in the personal life of everybody. As a reaction artist, have given their audiences that.
Sure.
And I appreciate, I'm working in this form where every week I'm having conversations and I think about it because the one side is like, is that focus on self narcissism or is that focus on self trying to capture real intimacy and give people intimacy in a world that so much lacks intimacy now?
Well, sure, both of those things are true. There's technological shifts that like promote all that too. Like, the fact that now your phone is a camera, and the fact that like now we can all like show each other pictures instantaneously. And so there's like people that you might be friends with for 20 years. And then like when you join Instagram, you're like, oh, actually, maybe you're never the person I thought you were. Like I had no idea this narcissism. But aside from that, there's the like, as we said, the gatekeepers. I don't think the gatekeepers are like necessarily these shadowy robed figures in a back room, like, raping children and drinking the blood of toddlers. Like, it just happens a little at a time. Like, it's like just little choices on what sells, what doesn't. And that focus on the personal is at the exclusion of considering wider networks and connections. You know what I mean? Like, that's how like control and social structure works. It's invisible. We aren't supposed to see how everything's connected. And so like these are the things that get promoted. Obviously, it sounds crazy to be like, I want to write this pop song about like the interweavings of the oil boards and the bank owners, But it's like, because that's not the function of the medium.
Yeah.
But there are like, I don't know, a sidelong Keith Jarrett piano solo does trigger certain parts in your brain that make you make connections between things in a way that like a 3-minute song formatted to fit on the radio doesn't. That make sense?
Yeah. I guess the long and short of it, though, is I hear you saying you're not really interested in giving people your personal life.
I mean, I released the tour diaries.
Yeah. Well, and that actually blew my... I mean, I don't know. It changed my perspective of you and your work.
Because
I can't tell you how much it did. I've listened to the Owls record 1,000 times.
Thanks.
I still sing along in this kind of mbop way where I don't know what you're saying.
Oh, good.
And I don't mean
onomatopoeia.
I kind of always felt like that was the point. And then I kind of...
Well, what?
Reading you and what, like, your specific thoughts, I was like, whoa. I wasn't ready for any of that. And I felt like that wasn't something you were interested in before. I was wondering if that is something now.
I guess, right, getting back to, like, being misunderstood, like, I feel like there was a certain amount of attention paid to me when I was young, and it wasn't like, obviously it wasn't like some huge scale, but it was enough to make me feel like there was I would read record reviews or something, and there was an obvious disconnect between the me that I thought I was and the me that I saw reflected back to myself through my friends and our relationships. And the like...
But what about the you and your art?
Right, that's what I was going to say. There's the persona. So maybe the like veil of the persona got intensified because there was such an intense disconnect that it was like, I would say like through Make Believe for sure it was that. Like Make Believe, that whole band, I feel like I was like a pro wrestling manager is how I'd think about it. Like I'm a bad guy pro wrestling manager. Like it must have, there was the seed of that character somewhere in me, but it was definitely like my worst self being projected. And I knew that it was funny. Like it was meant to be funny, this sort of like mean, drunk, pro wrestling shaman, like lizard, the shaman thing being like this sort of Lizard King caricature. That band literally changed my body shape, man. Like this whole like fat Lizard King thing. Yeah. But so the persona, maybe what I can say is I think maybe I'm more comfortable now with, I don't need so much of persona to like slip back and forth between like private self and like performing self or something.
Yeah.
That makes sense?
Yeah. No, definitely. And I saw that last night, I guess. Talking about your book and things that I didn't think about before. I never associated your music with drugs. I hate that fucking word.
Drugs?
I wish there was something else to say.
What, meaning just it's too simplistic for like what is a drug and what is
and it's just so, this isn't a drug, but weed is or whatever. Sure. But can you talk about its influence on your music?
The influence of drugs on the music? Oh, geez.
When I was in my heavy weed phase, I remember listening to, I'm trying to think, my playlist, Eventually All at Once, and thinking that is super psychedelic.
Yeah, for sure.
But I never would have thought that...
That we knew it?
Or I know it. No, I just, again, I guess it's still Ian MacKaye taught me everything about music, and I guess in my head, I feel like everybody has that philosophy. And I always feel like punk bands will tell me, don't be so high listening to this.
Oh, God, no. I mean, like, clarity of thought is like, a big deal to me, right? That's part of what we've been talking about, clarity of thought and expression. But, like, turns out like certain drugs really promote that, you know? And like eventually all at once, it's so funny because that was such a specifically, like the first Joan of Arc record, like our kind of like mission statement, we never had any guitar pedals for like the first 15 years. And I don't know if that's a thing that people realized or thought about, but like if you listen back to those records, super dry guitar tones, like no, sometimes they're layered, but you know, essentially we're like, this goes back to the clarity of expression. We're like modernists in the sense that like we always wanted every element to be like distinctly discernible. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that the ways that they're put together, like in like a T.S. Eliot like kind of way, like you aren't blending these things, you're just like setting them next to each other, right? So you can still make out this is this signal, this is this. So we called what we were doing with the first record dry psychedelia because there was like no, that's like how we thought of it.
Okay.
Portable model of and how memory works. By eventually all at once, there's no, maybe there's like a couple electric guitar overdubs, maybe there's an electric bass, but that's like a primarily very acoustic record.
Yeah, yeah.
And the idea was, how do we make this totally acoustic psychedelic record, you know, which, you know, obviously a lot of people do, but that was like our vision for that single thing. Yeah.
Writing a lot more.
Yeah.
Or not a lot more. Is
Yeah.
that something you were always doing?
I was never, like when I was younger, I read a lot of fiction. And then there was like probably a 10-year period where I read a lot of poetry. I read a lot of plays just because like traveling, you start to pick up on like there's certain things you can read better when traveling. And I read like a lot of nonfiction and a lot of essays, but I never read any fiction. And then, I don't know, I still like don't love, I love the fiction I love, you know, but it's still, I'm not like one of those people that like, you know, there's people who like love ska. Like I love the first Specials record, but I think it's because it's an amazing record. Like, I'm not a fan of the genre. You know what I mean? But there's people who like love genres of things.
Uh-huh.
I guess I kind of love like political thrillers. Like I'll watch any political thriller. I love coffee. Like some people can like tell this is good coffee or bad coffee. I'll drink any coffee. I'll drink any beer. I'll watch any political thriller. But like in terms of creative genres, I don't like love painting or love fiction or.
Then what happened where writing and literature was going to become a serious practice for you, a serious thing for you?
Yeah, it was sort of like this goes back to the like goals and to-do lists. It's like even though, like I said, I was jealous of Michael Shannon's Knowing What He's Doing every 15 minutes, there is like, I'm a very firm believer in like playfulness for creativity, you know, and like needing to like one of the Romantic poets, Keats, maybe, had this idea of what's it called? Negative capacity. Maybe it's not negative capacity. I think it's negative capacity, and well, whatever it is, it might be another
Term.
Yeah, another term that starts with that N and has a similar meaning. But the idea is that, like, how long can you sit with, like, a creative work of some kind and not know what it is and allow it to just exist in this mysterious, fertile place, you know, where, like, it's sort of all possibilities. And so, like, something like, I say, like, The Gap started with this idea of, like, this dystopian theme, but that's created by technological availability. Eventually, All at Once, all acoustic instruments. That record was recorded really weird. I recorded the guitars and vocals to that record. I recorded the whole record beginning to end in sequence, guitar and vocals, on 2 8-track reels. Okay, here's side 1 beginning to end. Here's side 2 beginning to end, guitar and vocals. Sam came in and was like, played bass beginning to end. Then my brother came in and played drums beginning to end. And the like technological psycho-emotional limitations of that were like, my dad had just passed away. We were all kind of like weirded out and set up a studio in my mom's house just to be like, this is how we'll just like all hang out for a couple weeks. So like there's these strictly practical limitations that sort of create the boundaries of the playing field, but then within it there's like this idea of just allowing strict enough to define the thing, but also like open enough to just like see where it goes. So fiction just happened. I think I started my first novel. I know I was 150 pages into it, but before I was like, oh, this can be a novel. Like I didn't know what it was. I just knew like, what if I just write about like these characters, and like even that was totally made out of systems where I like, it started with an alphabetical list of body parts. And then I just like wrote by association the history of each body part, and then looked at that and determined how many different characters are telling this, what are the relationships between these characters that come from that, you know? So it's all very like, it's about like allowing space for like, drifting, but then also setting parameters to drift within.
But again, I'm going to use the word courage. I don't know if you would, but the courage to decide I'm going to be somebody who writes and am going to publish it for other people. Like,
well, I mean, I had 2 novels out before I owned the publishing company.
Yeah.
And like the first one, I was just writing it and hadn't even thought about like sharing it. It felt like I was like a good break from band life. 'Cause like music is way different than band life. You know what I mean? And like,
yeah,
the like community aspects of band life are like amazing and utopian to me. The sort of like professional obligations of band life are like pretty stressful and soul crushing if you let them be, you know? So so it doesn't seem like courage as much as just like openness to like, well, where's this going?
The last thing, is it, or what's harder, to convince somebody to read a book or to get into your record?
Oh, well, I don't try to convince anybody either way. You know what I mean?
Well,
I mean, strictly,
or what is,
it's
okay. Yeah.
Everyone, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
obviously it's way easier to listen to a record because you can like, I'm going to put on a record while I do the dishes. I'm going to put on a record while I'm like doing something else. It's always happening in the background. You can drive a car and listen to a record. You can't drive your car and read a book.
I guess that's what is how daunting it, to me, it's like, what the fuck, trying to convince somebody to read? I don't know anybody who read. That's an exaggeration, but
yeah, sure.
That's a,
sure. I mean, right.
not-
It's not, it's like a antiquated technology. Like,
yeah, a little bit.
you know,
it's kind of like I'm going to start writing show tunes or something almost.
Yeah.
It's like, this is what people used to do.
yeah, it's not even show tunes. It's like, that is an antiquated style within the same technology, but like,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
but,
totally.
But like a book, you know, 150 years ago, everyone read because everyone had to read. In the same way that like little birds clean hippos' teeth, like we like, you know what I mean? And the hippo depends on the bird and the bird depends on the hippo.
Yeah.
It's like our brains evolved to read, like exercising any muscle. Okay, I understand this like long linear strain, you know. Now like no one reads, so no one knows how to read. That's, you know,
Absolutely.
it's like, because
I
now we
struggle
live in a
with it.
world of, I struggle with it, and it's what I spend most of each day doing. But it's because like our whole people had to read. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
it wasn't like a choice of, oh, I prefer reading. It was like, if you wanted to know anything, you read it.
If you wanted a story, you had to have that.
No, but that's what I'm saying.
Entertainment.
Yeah.
Almost. If you wanted entertainment, that was.
But
it.
not even just entertainment. If you wanted to know anything, you know what I mean? It was like,
Yeah.
like your life depended on like, or all your information of the outside world depended on this technology.
That was the most advanced technology we had. Yeah.
Yeah. So now it's like, if you don't need that, so more than like show tunes, it's like what? Like
Theater, almost.
flip phone. It's weird now that I own a publishing company and we think about how to sell books. We have to think about marketing it in terms of like, you know, the same way that like Bubble Bath is marketed. Like, wouldn't you like to indulge yourself in this, you know? Which is totally different than you need this.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank
for
you.
having me over.
My pleasure.
Cool. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.